I want you to picture this. It's 2:34 a.m. Your phone is glowing dimly on your chest. You're lying awake, stomach buzzing with that sour anxiety that only shows up after midnight. You've got a good thing going, maybe a relationship, a project, a moment of clarity. But somewhere inside, you already know it won't last. Not because someone else will take it from you, but because you'll find a way to blow it up yourself. And the worst part? You'll act like you didn't see it coming. That's the taste of self-sabotage. And you probably won't survive it, not in the version of life you were meant to live, anyway. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. I want to know who else is up late with me tonight. Now, let's get comfortable, and let's get started today. I've always hated mirrors. Not because I thought I looked particularly bad, but because mirrors are rude. They don't flatter you with kind lighting or emotional context. They reflect what is. And sometimes, what is a mess I caused. It started one morning. I was brushing my teeth with that crusted over numbness that comes when your body's awake but your soul still hasn't caught up. And I saw it, that little flicker of guilt behind my eyes. I knew exactly what I'd done. Not something scandalous. Not something dramatic. Just the usual sabotage. I'd ghosted a client. Cancelled a meeting that could have taken me forward. Ignored a text from someone who actually cared. All because I couldn't deal with success showing up in my life, unannounced, with a suitcase full of potential. So I did what I always do. I blew it up, quietly, invisibly, like a digital ninja of destruction. You see, sabotage rarely looks like a dramatic meltdown. It looks like procrastination disguised as planning. It looks like deleting emails you're too scared to open. It looks like waiting for motivation that isn't coming because motivation isn't a delivery service. It's a side effect of action. I remember reading a bizarre fact once. Octopuses have 3 hearts, and when they swim, one of them stops beating. It's like their bodies punish them for trying to escape. Humans are a little like that. When we move towards something better, some part of us shuts down in protest. It's not stupidity. It's not weakness. It's ancient programming. The brain has one job: keep you alive. Not happy. Not fulfilled. Just alive. And if your life has been built on patterns of pain or disappointment, your brain registers that as safe because you survived it. Trying something new? That's uncharted. Risky. Potentially fatal. Even if all you're trying to do is finally follow through on a gym membership or text that person back. One time, I was so scared of succeeding at something that I sabotaged it preemptively. I told myself, it's not going to work out anyway. So I just didn't show up. I even faked being sick. I looked at myself in the mirror that night and said out loud, "You know what you're doing." And I did. That was the worst part. There's an ongoing academic debate about whether self-sabotage is a conscious act or a subconscious defense mechanism. I think it's both. A tag team match between your inner child and your inner lawyer. One panicking, the other rationalizing. But here's the thing, it always starts with honesty. You can't fix a mess you won't admit you made. I started journaling, not with some fluffy affirmation app, but with brutal honesty. I wrote down what I'd done, what I didn't do, and what I knew I should have done. I made myself uncomfortable. I forced myself to reread the patterns. And it was like looking at a crime scene where I was both the victim and the culprit. It reminded me of this quote I read, can't remember who said it. Probably because my brain hoards trivia like a crow hoards shiny trash. Every man has 2 lives. The second starts when he realizes he only has one. It hit me. The mirror doesn't lie. It shows you what you've been avoiding. It doesn't care about your excuses or your good intentions. It just reflects. Sometimes I'd find myself arguing with my reflection like it was a disappointing roommate. You said we were gonna try today? Yeah, well, you didn't help. I'm literally you, dude. Cue awkward silence. And that's how you know sabotage is personal. It's an inside job. But it's also predictable. Almost ritualistic. Wake up, feel hopeful. Get a little momentum. Start worrying. Overthink. Delay. Collapse. Numb out. Repeat. Like a badly written sitcom that keeps recycling the same plot twist. And the crazy thing? We don't sabotage because we hate ourselves. We do it because we're scared we might not be good enough to handle what comes next. Like, what if I actually succeed and everyone finds out I was faking it? Imposter syndrome isn't some rare condition, it's practically a rite of passage for anyone trying to break their mold. So, I stopped expecting confidence and started settling for evidence. One step forward. One task done. One thing finished that I promised myself I'd do. Even if it was just making the damn bed. That was my first tiny rebellion against the part of me that wanted to stay stuck. Sabotage thrives in silence. In secrets. In shame. But the second you say it out loud, even just to yourself, you start pulling its wires loose. I'm not saying it's easy. I still mess up. Last week I ignored 3 calls from someone trying to help me. I knew it. I just didn't stop it in time. But I noticed. And that's new. Human intelligence fact? The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that makes rational decisions, is often hijacked by your amygdala, which is basically your emotional guard dog. That's why we react first and think later. You're not broken. You're just early to the party your brain hasn't finished decorating. Odd fact of the day? Sloths can hold their breath longer than dolphins. Why? Because they slow their heart rate so dramatically when resting. Kinda like us, when we're hiding from our potential. See? Nature gets it. The first time I saw my reflection and didn't look away, that's when everything started to shift. Not because I liked what I saw, but because I finally saw it. Fear is such a great actor. Like Oscar-worthy. It doesn't show up in your life wearing a hockey mask and carrying a chainsaw. It walks in dressed as being realistic. Or just trying to be careful. Sometimes it wears a cardigan and tells you to maybe wait a little longer until you're really ready. One morning, I sat at my desk with this gorgeous idea for a project that I knew had the power to change things. I had the skills. I had the audience. I even had the software open. And still, I found myself suddenly doing the dishes. Then reorganizing the spice cabinet. Then updating my phone. Suddenly, I was in a rabbit hole about why baby koalas eat their mom's poop to develop gut bacteria. True story. Gross. You're welcome. When I finally looked up, 4 hours had passed. The idea was still there. But colder now. Duller. Like it had started to die a little. I knew what was happening. Fear had walked in, pulled up a chair, and started coaching me on how not to ruin my life, which, paradoxically, meant doing absolutely nothing. Just wait, it said. Just think a bit longer. Maybe outline a backup plan. Or 10. Because what if you try and it doesn't work? Here's the plot twist no one tells you. Fear doesn't stop you because you're weak. Fear stops you because it's deeply efficient. Your brain is like a highly suspicious airport security agent. And new things? New things look like bombs. Neurologically speaking, fear triggers the amygdala, which is always scanning for danger. But here's where it gets tricky. It doesn't just respond to physical threats. It reacts to emotional risk, like judgment, embarrassment, or change. So your genius idea? To your brain, that's a saber-toothed tiger with a PowerPoint presentation. There's a phrase in psychology that's still debated heavily. Emotional reasoning. Basically, the idea that you feel anxious therefore something must be wrong. But that's not always true. Sometimes fear is just an echo of a past failure that never quite shut up. I remember talking to a friend, let's call him Sean, who had this ridiculous gift for photography. Like, frame it in a museum good. He had everything set to launch his portfolio online, but instead, he spent 6 months tweaking his logo. The man designed 42 different fonts. 42. All because the act of launching meant being seen. And being seen meant being judged. And sometimes judgment isn't even external, it's that little voice in your head that goes, "Who do you think you are?" That voice? That's fear doing improv. And unfortunately, it's really good at it. One night, I tried to track down the first moment I ever sabotaged myself because of fear. It was way earlier than I expected. Middle school talent show. I was going to play piano, something I was actually pretty good at. But right before my name was called, I faked a stomachache and ran off stage. Why? Because if I tried and failed, I'd be crushed. But if I never tried, I could imagine I was good. I could believe in the potential version of myself without ever testing it. Fear teaches you that potential is safer than proof. Potential can't be disproven. It's a fantasy that never betrays you. Until you're 32, watching someone else do the thing you were meant to do. Fear also tells you that staying still is safe. It's not. You just get left behind slower. There's a funny brain fact I read once. During REM sleep, the body experiences something called muscle atonia, basically, temporary paralysis. You dream of running or flying or screaming, but your body can't move. That's fear, too. A built-in system designed to protect you from acting out too much. But what happens when you live your whole life like that? Dreaming but stuck? I started noticing how fear dressed up in my life. For me, it often wore productivity. Like, let me just finish this one last thing first. Sometimes it wore logic. Let's make a spreadsheet and analyze the risks. Once, I even convinced myself that rereading a self-help book I'd already finished was essential prep before starting my own work. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. I once read about a study where they taught pigeons to push a button to get food. But then, they started giving the food randomly. The pigeons still kept pressing the button, obsessively. Why? Because sometimes it worked. That unpredictability created obsession. It's kind of how fear trains us to keep waiting. Because maybe this time, things will just happen on their own. They won't. You already know that. The worst part is, fear usually waits until you're inches from doing something amazing. It doesn't hit you when you're binging Netflix or eating sad cereal over the sink. No, it waits until you almost send the email. Almost take the leap. Then it shows up in a robe and slippers like, "Hey, let's talk about worst-case scenarios real quick." Sometimes I imagine fear as this tiny, jittery manager living in my ribcage. He has a clipboard. He's sweaty. He thinks everything is a liability. His favorite words are, "What if?" And I have to remind myself every single day, he works for me. Not the other way around. So now, when I feel that familiar flutter in my chest, the one that tells me to wait, slow down, think again, I take it as a green light. I figure if it scares me that much, it's probably worth doing. And yeah, I still flinch. I still hesitate. But I've stopped listening to fear like it's gospel. Now I treat it like spam email. "Thank you for your feedback, I'll get back to you never." The weirdest part? Fear isn't always wrong. That's what makes it so powerful. It could go badly. You might fail. But what I've realized is this: I'd rather fail on my own terms than succeed in a life fear built for me. Fear is a terrible life coach. It doesn't know your goals. It doesn't care about your dreams. Its only KPI is survival. But you're not here to just not die. You're here to live, whatever that means for you. So next time fear shows up offering advice, just nod politely, thank it for its concern, and then go do the exact thing it told you not to do. Because on the other side of that panic, that's where your actual life is hiding. It's funny how pain, even the worst kind, starts to feel comfortable. Like an old couch with a spring sticking out. You know it's bad for your back. You know it's ugly. But it's your couch. And at least you know exactly where not to sit. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was addicted to the familiar sting of failure. Not because I liked losing, but because it was predictable. I knew how to navigate disappointment. Success, though? That was a stranger with a suitcase and no return ticket. The day I figured this out, I was sitting in a coffee shop, watching a couple argue at the next table. It wasn't a loud, dramatic fight. No flying lattes or overturned chairs. Just this slow, practiced exchange of sharp words wrapped in soft tones. And I realized, this wasn't their first argument. It was their rhythm. It was how they related. I recognized it because I did the same thing, with myself. I'd get a glimpse of something good, an opportunity, a connection, a clean shot at peace, and then I'd pick a fight with my own joy. Not directly. Not obviously. I'd just do something small to make sure I ended up right where I was most used to being, disappointed, frustrated, slightly bitter, vaguely tired. That's the trap of familiar pain. You start mistaking it for home. Psychologists call it trauma bonding, when you emotionally attach to harmful patterns because they feel familiar. It's still debated in academic circles how this affects long-term neural architecture, but one thing's for sure, your brain loves a good routine. Even if it hurts. You ever notice how some people date the same type of partner over and over again? Or switch jobs, only to find the exact same toxic environment wearing a different logo? That's not coincidence. That's the brain trying to recreate the known. It's less risky than change. Even misery can be soothing if it's predictable. When I was a kid, I grew up in a house where everything felt like it might explode at any moment. Not physically. Emotionally. Tension was the default setting. So, guess what I sought out later in life? Chaos. I didn't call it that, of course. I called it passion, or spontaneity, or keeping things interesting. But really, I was just replaying what felt normal. The weirdest part? When life finally did calm down, when I had a stretch of stability, I couldn't handle it. I started poking holes in it. Stirring up drama where there was none. Picking fights, ghosting people, canceling plans last minute. Because peace felt like emptiness. It wasn't until much later that I learned, peace is supposed to feel boring. That's the point. There's a random fact I love. See otters hold hands while they sleep so they don't drift apart. I think humans do the emotional equivalent. We cling to old pain while resting in the present, so we don't lose track of who we've always been. The problem is, we end up drifting anyway. Just in circles. The familiar has gravity. It pulls at you. You can physically move forward in life. New job, new city, new relationship. But still find yourself emotionally orbiting the same disappointment. Different players, same script. I remember starting something new once. A healthy relationship, for once, and it was quiet. Not in a dull way. Just, not dramatic. And it freaked me out. I kept waiting for the catch. I invented reasons to doubt them. Then, when that wasn't enough, I started acting weird until they pulled away. And I remember thinking, there it is. This I know how to deal with. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't sabotaging myself because I was afraid of failure. I was afraid of being in unfamiliar territory. Even if it was better. There's a phrase that stuck with me from a book I never finished, ironically. The devil you know is safer than the angel you don't. That's the operating system of sabotage. You stay where it hurts because at least you've memorized the exits. So how do you break it? Honestly? First, you have to grieve. Grieve the version of yourself that only knew how to survive. Thank them. They kept you alive. But they're not the one who's going to take you where you want to go. Then, you sit with the discomfort of goodness. It sounds backwards, right? But it's real. Let yourself be awkward around kindness. Let yourself feel weird when someone doesn't leave. Let yourself feel the silence of peace without trying to fill it with noise. The human intelligence fact for this round, like the anterior cingulate cortex, is part of your brain that processes both physical pain and social rejection. Meaning? Your brain literally registers emotional discomfort as physical pain. No wonder we retreat back to what's familiar, even if it's awful. And yet, slowly, the more you stay with something healthy, the more it stops feeling foreign. The brain rewires. You start to associate calm with safety instead of danger. But it takes time. And patience. And a ridiculous amount of self-forgiveness. I used to have this notebook where I'd log the times I didn't sabotage myself. It sounds corny, but it helped. Like, did I answer that email instead of ignoring it for 3 days? Gold star. Did I go on the date and not create a dramatic reason to cancel? Amazing. It helped me recognize that change wasn't a leap, it was a bunch of tiny stumbles in the right direction. One time I was walking in a park and saw this squirrel burying a nut. But really carefully. Patting the dirt like it was tucking a child in. It looked ridiculous, but also, I got it. That squirrel didn't know if it would find the nut again. It just had to trust it would remember. That's kind of what breaking out of familiar pain is like. You bury the version of yourself who only knew chaos, and you trust that the better version, the one that can thrive, is in there somewhere, waiting to be remembered. The pull of the past is strong. But you're stronger. You just have to stop mistaking pain for a personality trait. Familiar doesn't mean safe. And uncomfortable doesn't mean wrong. Sometimes, the most rebellious thing you can do is sit in a room where no one's yelling, no one's leaving, and nothing's falling apart, and just let yourself be okay. Even if your brain is screaming otherwise. There was a time in my life, longer than I care to admit, when I truly believed in the myth of the big break. You know the one. The magical moment when everything clicks. The lightning bolt. This is it. Instant when the universe finally decides you're ready. I waited for that moment like people wait for a bus that isn't on the schedule. I thought if I just hustled hard enough, visualized it often enough, or suffered thoroughly enough, some cosmic director would call action, and everything would change. But it never came. Instead, what came was a long, slow drizzle of opportunities one either ignored, doubted, or outright sabotaged. Not because I didn't want them, but because they didn't look like the big break. They were too small, too quiet, too ordinary. I once turned down a job because it didn't feel big enough. I told myself I was holding out for something better. What I didn't admit was that I was terrified of getting stuck in something real. Something that might require me to actually follow through. Because here's the dirty truth, the big break fantasy? It's often just self-sabotage dressed in ambition's clothing. It lets you wait instead of act. It turns potential into a security blanket. It gives you a way to feel superior while doing absolutely nothing. Oh, I'm just waiting for the right moment. You know what I was really doing? Avoiding risk. Avoiding the chance that I'd start something and realize I wasn't as ready as I thought. There's a heavily debated idea in behavioral science called learned industriousness. It suggests that people become conditioned to put in effort when that effort is consistently rewarded. But the kicker is, you have to start somewhere for that conditioning to take hold. If you wait for the reward first, the engine never even turns on. I remember this conversation I had with a friend, we'll call her Marcy. She was talking about how she hadn't started her YouTube channel yet because she didn't have the right camera, the right lighting, the right niche. She kept saying she wanted it to be perfect. I asked her, "What if perfect is the thing keeping you from ever beginning?" She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Honestly," she said, "I think I'm just scared it'll flop. And if I never try, then I never have to find out." That hit me like a slap wrapped in a hug. Because I'd done the same thing, countless times. I'd built entire castles in the sky, then refused to lay a single brick on the ground. One time, I recorded a podcast episode in my closet. Literal closet. Sweating like a rotisserie chicken next to my winter coats. I didn't have a mic stand, so I stacked 3 shoeboxes and balanced my phone on top. It sounded rough. I got 6 plays. One of them was me. But I did it. And that changed everything. Not because the world noticed, but because I noticed. I proved to myself that I wasn't just someone who wanted to do things, I was someone who did them. Even badly. Waiting for the big break is like waiting for someone to come save you from a room where the door's already unlocked. You just have to stand up and turn the knob. But we don't. We wait. We research. We overthink. We fantasize. We tell ourselves we're being strategic, when really, we're just afraid to be seen trying. Because if we try and it flops, then what? Then, we're human. That's what. I once asked a mentor what his big break moment was. He laughed and said, I never had one. I had 4,000 tiny breaks. Most of them looked like me failing privately before anything ever worked publicly. That stuck with me. Because what if the big break isn't a lightning bolt? What if it's a series of tiny sparks, and you're the one holding the matches? There's something deeply comforting about the myth of the big break. It makes you feel like the pressure's off. Like it's out of your hands. You just have to be patient, right? But that's not patience. That's passive avoidance. Patience is what you practice while you're moving, while you're building, while you're making cringe-level first drafts and whispering, "This is probably garbage," into your coffee. Every good thing in my life came from something that looked not ready. Not perfect. Not flashy. Just done. Started. Real. Even now, whenever I feel stuck, I ask myself, are you waiting for something to begin? Or are you pretending you're waiting so you don't have to face the work? It's usually the second one. And when I admit that, the fog lifts. I don't always take a huge step forward. Sometimes it's just replying to an email. Sometimes it's editing one paragraph. But every action chips away at the myth. And reveals something even better than a big break: progress. Here's a little brain nugget for you. The dopamine hit you get from taking a tiny action is often stronger than the one from fantasizing about a big outcome. The problem? Fantasizing takes zero risk. But it also gives you nothing real. We live in a culture that glorifies overnight success stories. What they don't show you is the decade before that night. The invisible years. The piles of drafts. The awkward phone calls. The nights when you cried over a 3-view video. That's not failure. That's pre-success. The big break is a myth. What's real is you, right now, deciding to stop waiting. Even if the first thing you make sucks. Even if no one claps. Even if it's just you, sitting in your closet, talking into a pile of shoeboxes. Because the universe doesn't give you a big break. It gives you a million chances to start small, and waits to see what you'll do with them. I used to think my biggest fear was failure. Turns out, it was success. Let me explain. One afternoon, not too long ago, I was sitting in front of my laptop, staring at an email that should have made me ecstatic. It was an offer. A real one. Big name. Good money. The kind of email people manifest with vision boards and Pinterest quotes. And instead of celebrating, I closed the tab and walked away like it was a trap. I sat on my floor and felt sick. Not nervous. Not excited. Just ill, like my body was rejecting the idea of my life getting better. And that's when I realized I wasn't afraid of failing. I was terrified that I might actually pull it off. Because if I did, then what? See, failure is easy to manage. It's familiar. You fail, you get sympathy, you reset. But success? That means visibility. Expectations. Maintenance. The risk of losing something you never thought you'd have in the first place. Success meant being seen. And not in the filtered, curated, safe for stories way. I'm talking about being seen, for real. Your talent, your voice, your choices, your worth. All of it out in the open, with no control over who claps and who shrugs. There's a term in psychology called upper limit problem. It's a debated theory that some people subconsciously sabotage themselves when life gets too good, because they don't believe they deserve happiness beyond a certain threshold. They hit an internal ceiling and either pull back or crash through it in a panic. That was me. I had this internal thermostat for how much good I was allowed to feel. And anytime things rose above that limit, whether through love, money, opportunity, I'd start cooling it down with sabotage. Ghosting people. Missing deadlines. Talking myself out of opportunities. All so I could bring my life back to the temperature I was used to. Once, I was in a relationship that was shockingly healthy. No games, no chaos, just connection. And what did I do? I convinced myself it was too soon. That I needed space, that maybe I didn't know what I wanted. The truth? I knew exactly what I wanted. I just didn't think I could handle having it. It's wild how we romanticize the climb, but freak out at the summit. Like we're not sure the air up there is breathable. The human intelligence fact for today? The brain doesn't distinguish well between excitement and anxiety. Both states activate similar physiological responses: racing heart, shallow breath, hyperfocus. So when something amazing starts to happen, the body reacts the same way it would if you were being chased by a bear. That's why success feels like danger to an untrained nervous system. I remember reading about how astronauts have to train extensively for gravity shifts, not just physically, but psychologically. Because the human body gets disoriented in zero gravity. Success is kind of like that. It feels floaty. Unsafe. You've left the known rules behind. And for people who've experienced more struggle than support, success doesn't feel like victory. It feels like betrayal. Like you've somehow skipped a step or left someone behind. There's this offbeat fact I love: lobsters grow by shedding their shell. But during that molting process, they're soft and vulnerable, basically giant sea marshmallows. They hide under rocks while their new armor hardens. That's what success is. It's not the polished TED Talk moment. It's the squishy, exposed, "I don't know what I'm doing," in between part. But no one talks about that. We talk about hustle and grind. We talk about chasing the bag. But what happens when you catch it? Sometimes I'd fantasize about success the same way people fantasize about revenge or abs. Not because I wanted it, but because I wanted the idea of it. The aesthetic. The validation. But when it actually got close, I ran. Because the fantasy is safe. The reality asks you to show up. I've met people who never launch the thing they're obsessed with. They'll talk about it for years. Plan it. Workshop it. But never actually go live. Why? Because the moment it's real, the moment it's out there, it can be judged. Or worse, accepted. And then what excuse do you have for hiding? One time I got invited to speak on a panel with people I've looked up to for years. I said yes. Then I immediately spiraled into imposter syndrome and tried to fake a scheduling conflict. I was ready to give up something I wanted just so I wouldn't have to live up to it. I've come to learn this: success is a disruption. It shakes loose everything you thought you knew about your limits. It forces you to upgrade your identity. And that's terrifying. We say we want transformation, but we don't always want the work of becoming someone new. Especially when the old version of us has fans, supporters, stories, maybe even a decent playlist. And yet, every time I let myself stay small, I'd feel it. That itch in my chest. That whisper that said, "This isn't it. You're pretending." And pretending is exhausting. So I started doing this thing. Whenever I accomplished something, even something minor, I'd sit with it for 2 minutes. Literally set a timer. I'd say out loud, "This is happening. I am allowed to enjoy this." It felt awkward at first. Cringy. But over time, it rewired something. It gave my body permission to stop running. Because here's what no one tells you: you don't have to earn every good thing. You don't have to apologize for your glow-up. You don't have to shrink so others can breathe easier. You just have to stay put. Breathe through the panic. Let your shell harden. Let success feel like home. It took me way too long to realize my brain wasn't always on my side. Which feels like a betrayal, doesn't it? Like finding out your loyal dog has been chewing through your charging cables while you sleep. You want to be mad, but then you look closer, and all you see is fear. That's your brain. It's not evil, it's just ancient. A little out of date. Kind of like someone still using Windows 95 to run a smart home. The intentions are good, the wiring is chaotic. I remember one night, I was about to click submit on this pitch email that had taken me days to write. My mouse hovered over the send button like it was made of lava. Then I got this flood of physical resistance: tight chest, sweaty hands, dry mouth. My brain was basically screaming, "Abort! Abort!" And that's when it hit me: my brain wasn't reacting to the task, it was reacting to the change. Here's a fun human intelligence fact. The brain interprets uncertainty as a potential threat, triggering the same fight or flight responses you'd get from, say, hearing a twig snap in the woods at night. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational part, gets overridden by your limbic system, which just wants to keep you alive, even if that means keeping you stuck. So yeah, trying something new? Launching a business, sending a vulnerable text, changing your routine? Your brain hates it. Not because it's wrong, but because it's new. And I don't blame it. Change means you're walking into the unknown. And the unknown, for your nervous system, is basically Jurassic Park. There could be metaphorical velociraptors waiting. So your brain floods you with doubt to keep you safe. But here's where things get messy. Your brain doesn't always update its files. It doesn't know the difference between an actual threat and a PowerPoint presentation. It just knows, this feels different. Better freak out. One time, I joined a fitness class I'd been wanting to try for months. I showed up early, parked outside, and just sat there. My heart was pounding like I was about to rob a bank. I never even got out of the car. Drove straight home. Not because I didn't want to do it, but because it was unfamiliar. And my brain, being the overprotective bodyguard it is, whispered, "Let's not die today." There's this odd fact I found once while deep diving on the internet to avoid my feelings. Sharks are older than trees. Sharks have existed for over 400 million years, while the first trees showed up around 350 million years ago. Sharks evolved to survive everything, from mass extinctions to climate shifts. Your brain? It's kind of like a shark. It doesn't want evolution. It wants survival. That's why breaking a habit or starting a new pattern feels so hard. Your brain isn't broken, it's just loyal to the past. But that loyalty comes at a cost. I'd spend hours planning a new routine, meal prep, workouts, focused work blocks. And then the next morning, I'd wake up and feel like I'd been hit by a wall of fog. Nothing made sense. I'd scroll. Snack. Nap. The plan? Gone. Because the moment I tried to shift my identity, my brain triggered the security system. Intruder alert! Growth detected! Academic psychologists still argue about this one, whether behavioral change is more about rewiring neural pathways or simply overriding habitual impulses through sheer repetition. Honestly, both matter. But either way, it starts with noticing. Noticing the resistance. Not judging it. Just naming it. Now, whenever I feel that full body, nope, when I try something new, I say out loud, "Okay, brain. I see you. Thanks for trying to keep me safe. But I got this." It feels ridiculous. But it works. Talking to your brain like it's a nervous assistant with a clipboard can actually calm the response. It brings your prefrontal cortex back online. Like rebooting the system. You ever tried to update your phone and it says, "Your device must restart to complete the installation"? That's you every time you try to change your life. Your brain needs a reboot. And during that reboot, things feel wobbly. Wrong, even. That's not failure, it's just your wiring adjusting. Once I realized this, I stopped expecting change to feel good. Instead, I started welcoming the weirdness. The emotional friction. The awkward stage where everything feels off. Because that's the sign you're actually shifting something. And let's be real, growth doesn't come with a parade. It comes with headaches, self-doubt, and an alarming number of snack breaks. If it feels easy, it's probably a rerun. If it feels disorienting, you're probably doing something new. I used to think motivation was the key. That I had to feel ready. But readiness is a myth. You don't wait for the fear to leave. You move through it, with it, despite it. Like trying to walk through water while wearing jeans. Uncomfortable, yes, but still possible. Every time I broke a pattern, even in a small way, my brain screamed. But then, it didn't. Over time, the screaming turned into whispering. And eventually, silence. That's the gift of neuroplasticity. Your brain can change. It just throws a tantrum first. One of the biggest lies I ever told myself was that I needed to fix my mindset before taking action. No. Action is what fixes your mindset. Movement rewrites fear. So I started making small moves. Ridiculously small. Set a timer for 5 minutes of work. Open the document. Type one sentence. Close it. That's it. Celebrate like I won a Grammy. Because what I was really doing, retraining my brain to believe that new doesn't mean danger. It's like teaching a cat to trust you. No sudden moves. Lots of patience. Occasional treats. We expect transformation to look like fire and thunder. But most of the time, it looks like quietly showing up despite the noise in your head. So the next time your brain screams, "Danger!" because you're doing something different, pause. Thank it. Remind it you're not in the jungle anymore. You're just trying a new Pilates class. Or writing a pitch email. Or saying yes instead of your usual, "Let me think about it." And then do the thing anyway. Because the more you do, the less scary it becomes. And eventually, the unknown becomes the new familiar. There was a stretch of my life, about 2 years give or take, where I wasn't just comfortable in chaos. I thrived in it. It was like I'd accidentally signed up for a 24/7 roller coaster pass and just decided, might as well make the most of it. I was always busy. Always dealing with something. Always juggling. But if you looked closely, most of what I was juggling were torches I had lit myself. There's something weirdly seductive about chaos. It gives you a reason. A focus. A kind of makeshift identity. When everything's falling apart, you don't have time to question deeper things like, "Am I living in alignment?" Or, "What do I really want?" No. You're too busy just trying to stay upright. And I like that. Not consciously, of course. On the surface, I complained constantly. I just want some peace. Just a break. But deep down, chaos gave me something peace couldn't: purpose. It's kind of like how some people only feel productive when they're stressed. They say things like, "I work better under pressure." No, you work more frantically under pressure. There's a difference. Adrenaline is addicting. It mimics focus. It gives you that locked-in feeling. But it's not clarity, it's survival. The more I looked back, the more I saw the pattern. I'd create little fires in my life so I could feel heroic for putting them out. Missed deadlines. Last-minute scrambles. Emotional messes. I wasn't unlucky. I was hooked on the drama. There's a real psychological phenomenon behind this, called drama addiction, though the name is still up for academic debate. It's when your body becomes accustomed to the hormonal cocktail of stress, cortisol, adrenaline, the works, and begins to crave it. Not unlike a caffeine dependency, only louder and more emotionally expensive. I didn't know how to function in stillness. Stillness felt like failure. Like something was wrong. If I had free time, I'd invent a new crisis. Like, "Oh no, I forgot to organize my computer files." Cue 8 hours of digital chaos while ignoring the real task I'd been avoiding. I once had a perfectly smooth week lined up. Nothing urgent. Nothing stressful. Just a few manageable to-dos. By Wednesday, I was itching. So I signed up to help a friend with their event, offered to babysit someone's hyper dog, and picked a weird, complicated fight with my own therapist. Yes, my therapist. Why? Because without chaos, I didn't know who I was. There's a bizarre animal fact I always come back to: goats will sometimes climb into trees. Full trees. Like jungle gym levels of absurdity. Not because they need to, but because they can. That was me. Climbing drama trees just for the thrill of it. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't out here causing scandal-level meltdowns. Most of it was subtle. Procrastinating until the last possible second. Saying yes to things I knew I couldn't handle. Picking the most complicated version of a simple task, just to make it feel more important. And then I'd act surprised when everything was on fire. Wow, why does this always happen to me? It didn't. I happened to me. The comfort in chaos is this: it keeps you from facing stillness. And stillness? That's where the real questions live. Like, what would I do if I wasn't fixing everything all the time? Who am I without the scramble? I remember one Sunday morning, I had nowhere to be. No deadlines. No crises. And I genuinely didn't know what to do. I walked around my apartment like a confused Roomba. Made a smoothie. Rearranged 3 throw pillows. Then, for absolutely no reason, convinced myself I should do my taxes 3 months early. Why? Because chaos had become my normal. And without it, I didn't feel alive. I felt irrelevant. That's the trap. Chaos tricks you into thinking it's movement, progress, urgency. But really, it's just noise. I started noticing how often I created intensity instead of meaning. How I confused busy with important. I'd rather feel overwhelmed than aimless. Overbooked than reflective. Because reflection meant sitting still. And sitting still meant facing the stuff I'd buried under all that motion. Like fear, grief, regret. And that scary question. What if I stop and nothing's there? But what I learned here is stillness isn't emptiness. It's clarity. It's the place where real direction starts. And learning to sit with that was brutal. The first few times I tried to have quiet days, I felt like my skin was on inside out. I'd pick up my phone 100 times. Refresh things that didn't need refreshing. Invent reasons to check in on projects that were perfectly fine. But slowly, over time, I started to detox from the drama. I gave myself permission to not be in crisis. And you know what happened? Nothing. No collapse. No punishment. Just breath. The human brain has a built-in negativity bias. It notices threats more than it notices neutral or positive things. That's evolutionary. You survived more efficiently if you saw the tiger before the sunset. But in modern life, that means your brain will scan for problems even when there aren't any. And if it doesn't find one, it might make one up. That's why learning to love peace is a practice. You don't wait until you feel ready. You train for it. You let your nervous system know it's safe not to be in fight mode all the time. I had to replace chaos with structure. Not rigid, soul-sucking structure. Just enough scaffolding to keep me from swinging back into the drama hammock. Tiny routines. Gentle boundaries. Things like, I don't respond to emails after 7 p.m. Or, I sit in silence for 5 minutes in the morning, even if my brain screams the whole time. It was uncomfortable. But that's the point. Healing from chaos isn't glamorous. It's slow. Boring. It's making tea instead of pouring another espresso. Saying no when every cell in your body is saying, let's do more. It's letting the moment be enough. Here's your odd fact for this section. Sea cucumbers can eject their own internal organs to distract predators. Then, over time, they regrow them. It's dramatic, messy, and completely unnecessary, unless you're constantly being hunted. We're not being hunted. We're just afraid of stillness. But the truth? The most powerful thing I ever did wasn't launching a new project or winning anything. It was saying, I don't need to live in a storm to feel alive. You ever hear a voice in your head that sounds a little too familiar? Not dramatic, not villainous, just casually mean? Like a lazy roommate who's lived in your mental attic for years and thinks they know you better than you know yourself? Mine says stuff like, are you really going to wear that? Sure, apply for that. Let's see how that goes. Wow, you're doing this again? Bold move. It doesn't scream. It murmurs. Snide, sarcastic, always a half step behind every thought I tried to move forward. For a long time, I thought this voice was my intuition. You know, that inner compass we're told to trust. But intuition feels steady. Gentle. The voice I'm talking about? It feels like a heckler in the cheap seats. Eventually, I realized what it was, my inner critic. And the reason it sounded so familiar was because it sounded exactly like me. Not the grown-up, self-aware me. The younger me. The version that learned early on that keeping expectations low meant protecting yourself from disappointment. The voice that mistook self-doubt for wisdom. Who figured if you tear yourself down first, no one else can beat you to it. There's a psychological theory, still evolving, still debated, called self-verification theory. It suggests we're driven to maintain a consistent self-concept, even if that concept is negative. So if you believe deep down you're average, unworthy, or messy, any evidence of success threatens that belief. So what do? We sabotage to restore the balance. So the inner voice gets to stay right. I used to think the voice was keeping me humble, grounded, realistic. But actually, it was just keeping me stuck. And here's the messed up part, it didn't even start as my voice. Most inner critics are just echoes, teachers, parents, bullies, exes, people whose words got stuck in your mind like gum under a desk. Over time, you repeat them so often, you stop realizing they don't belong to you. One night, I sat down and tried to write a list of the things this voice always said. Just a casual list, like I was eavesdropping on myself. You're too inconsistent. No one actually cares. This is going to be embarrassing. Then I asked myself, would I ever say this to someone I love? Not once. Not even close. So I gave my inner critic a name. Not something scary or dramatic. I called it Clint. Don't ask why. It just felt right. I needed to see it as separate. As a tired, over-caffeinated, underqualified assistant who had taken over my internal messaging system. The goal wasn't to kill Clint. It was to take away his mic. Because here's the trick, the inner critic only has power if you believe it's you talking. Once you realize it's just noise, you can start turning the volume down. Anyway, the day I started talking back to Clint, things shifted. Not in a fireworks kind of way. More like, oh, I don't have to take this seriously. If Clint said, you're not ready, I'd respond, cool. I'm doing it anyway. If Clint said, this is going to suck, I'd say, then it'll suck with style. And I'd go do the thing. It's awkward at first. You feel like a motivational speaker talking to an empty room. But over time, you create new dialogue. You build a counter voice. One that sounds more like a best friend than a bodyguard. It says things like, that was brave. Or, let's try again tomorrow. Or, you're allowed to be new at this. It's not toxic positivity. It's just not self-bullying. And I've noticed something strange. The less I listen to the critic, the less it talks. Like a troll who gets bored when you stop feeding it. The default mode network, DMN, a group of brain regions active when your mind wanders, is linked to self-referential thinking, basically, your inner monologue. Meditation and mindfulness practices can reduce DMN activity, which helps quiet the self-critical noise. Translation? Sometimes you just need to breathe and shut up for a minute. But I get it. Quiet can be scary. Because when the critic goes silent, all the real stuff bubbles up. The desires. The dreams. The parts of you that want more. And they've been waiting behind the sarcasm for a long time. The hardest part of turning down Clint's voice was realizing how often I used it as a shield. Because if I got there first, if I mocked myself before anyone else could, then I was in control. But it was false control. Because what I was actually doing was creating a ceiling. A limit. There's this moment that sticks in my memory. I had just finished a small creative project. Nothing huge, just something I was proud of. I shared it, bracing for the usual self-inflicted post-posting shame spiral. And it didn't come. Instead, I felt quiet. Not high. Not euphoric. Just calm. That silence? That was the absence of sabotage. That was a moment where I didn't shrink myself. Didn't pre-trash the work. Didn't brace for imaginary disaster. And honestly, it was kind of intoxicating. I started chasing more of those moments. Not perfect performances, just uninterrupted ones. Moments where I showed up and let it be what it was, without Clint narrating over everything like a snarky DVD commentary track. So if you've got a voice like that, and you probably do, name it. Separate it. Talk back. Remind it who's actually running the show. Because your inner critic may sound like you. But it's not the real you. I thought the comfort zone was a soft couch. Turns out, it's more like a bear trap, cozy at first, then suddenly you can't feel your legs. The thing no one tells you about growth is that it's lonely. Not just in the poetic, romantic way, but in the what is happening to my life kind of way. I always imagined progress would feel like applause. It felt more like silence. Or side-eye. Or subtle withdrawal from people who used to know me. See, the comfort zone isn't just a mental state. It's an ecosystem. A network of habits, relationships, patterns, and unspoken agreements. And the second you start changing, even a little, it disrupts the whole system. At first, I thought it was just me being paranoid. Like maybe I was overanalyzing things. But no. The shift is real. You grow, and suddenly, people who are comfortable with your old version don't know what to do with the new one. And sometimes, they push back. Sometimes in words. Sometimes in silence. Often in the form of, "You've changed," said like an accusation. And honestly, they're right. I had changed. But what no one prepares you for is how hard it is to keep changing when your environment starts dragging you backward. There's this academic theory called homeostasis, usually used in biology, that applies here too. Systems, like bodies, relationships, or even social circles, tend to resist change. They try to return to their set point. So when one part shifts, the rest of the system sends out little corrections to pull it back. That's why you hit resistance after you make a move forward, not before. I used to think the hard part was starting. It's not. The hard part is not going back. Let me tell you about this time I finally got serious about boundaries. I started saying no. Not in a dramatic way, just quietly, firmly, like, "Hey, I can't do that right now." And oh boy, the backlash was subtle but sharp. Suddenly I was acting distant. Too busy. Someone even said I was getting a little full of myself. And all I'd done was protect my time. Respect my energy. Say no to drama I used to marinate in. It felt like a betrayal. Like I'd broken some unspoken rule that said, "As long as you keep playing small, we'll love you." But I didn't want to play small anymore. And yeah, it hurt. Growth can feel like exile. Not because people are evil, but because your change reminds them they're not changing. And that's uncomfortable. So they either pull away or pull you back. There's this bizarre animal behavior I once read about. If a crab tries to climb out of a bucket, the others will actually pull it back down. Not out of cruelty, just instinct. They don't want to be left behind. That's not just crabs. That's humans. I had this friend, we'll call her Jules. When I started making real progress, she got weird. Not obviously. Just distant. Cold. Snarky in that "I'm joking unless you're hurt" kind of way. For a while, I bent backward to stay likable. I dimmed things down. Brushed off wins. Made myself smaller. But the cost? I started shrinking again. That's when I knew I wasn't just growing, I was outgrowing. And that's hard to admit. There's this deep, primal need to belong. Our brains are wired for it. Literally. Social rejection activates the same parts of the brain as physical pain. That's your human intelligence fact of the day. So yeah, it's not just in your head. It hurts because it's supposed to. But here's the thing no one wants to say, not everyone gets to go with you. Some people are chapters. Not the whole book. Letting go isn't about being better than anyone. It's about being honest. If your growth makes someone uncomfortable, and they make you feel guilty for it, that's not a reflection of your ego. It's a reflection of their stagnation. And yeah, it sucks. I wish I could say it gets easier. It doesn't. But it does get clearer. At some point, I stopped chasing approval and started asking a different question. Does this support the version of me I'm trying to become? And if the answer was no, I gave myself permission to step back. Even when it was messy. Even when I cried after. Even when I had to mourn the old rhythms, the old jokes, the weirdly comforting chaos. Your comfort zone will always try to romanticize itself. It'll whisper things like, "Remember when things were easier?" Or, "At least you knew where you stood." But don't be fooled. Familiar isn't safe. It's just familiar. You ever wear an old pair of shoes and realize, only after putting them on, how bad they feel? That's what going back is like. Tight. Wrong. Heavy in ways you forgot. Anyway, when I started spending more time in spaces that felt healthy, aligned, quiet, I noticed something strange. At first, I felt like I didn't belong. I'd scan the room for drama. Wait for the tension. Miss the chaos. But over time, that craving dulled. The noise quieted. I stopped looking over my shoulder for old patterns and new people. And eventually, the comfort zone expanded. Because that's the truth, it's not about breaking out once. It's about stretching what feels normal until the new becomes the default. Now, when people say, "You've changed," I smile. Because yeah, I have. And I'm not going back. Nobody tells you that growth can be lonely. Not like, no one to eat lunch with. Lonely. More like, I no longer fit into the old group chat. Lonely. Like realizing you're the only one at the table asking, "Hey, what if we didn't complain about the same thing for the 6th month in a row?" And when I started leveling up, quietly, inconsistently, awkwardly, I started losing people. Not dramatically. Not in tear-filled fallouts or fiery text exchanges. It was more like watching someone back away slowly until one day, you realize they're just gone. What hit me hardest was how natural it all felt. No slammed doors. No betrayals. Just an eerie fade. Like they were allergic to the new me. Or maybe I was allergic to the old dynamics. See, the moment you start changing, even in small, unsexy ways, waking up earlier, setting boundaries, choosing peace, your orbit shifts. And people who were once in your daily rotation start to feel like static. Not bad people. Just people who knew the version of you that made fewer waves. And when you stop playing that part, the whole script changes. Sometimes they drift. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you find yourself rereading old messages, trying to figure out who stopped talking first. Like silence was a crime scene. Here's what no one warns you about. When you leave your old life, you don't just lose bad habits. You lose witnesses. People who remember when you were broken and insecure and hilarious in your mess. People who cheered for your self-deprecating jokes because that was your role in the group, the relatable disaster. But now you're trying. You're making fewer jokes. You're saying things like, "I need time for myself." You're posting less but meaning more. And the people who loved your chaos? They don't quite know where to put their hands anymore. And neither do you. It's uncomfortable. That discomfort? That's the price of becoming someone new. I remember this one friend, we'll call him Leo. We used to hang out constantly. We thrived on venting, spiraling, trauma bonding. Our friendship was basically a podcast no one asked for. But when I started going to therapy and unpacking some of the mess, I noticed something. The more I healed, the less we had to talk about. He started calling less. I stopped initiating. Eventually, we both just stopped. No fight. No finale. Just two people slowly growing apart because one of them decided to grow up. There's a term in sociology, still debated but compelling, called role exit. It's the process of leaving behind a role central to your identity. And when you exit one role like the fixer or the funny mess, others around you struggle to relate. They miss the version of you they knew how to love. And in some twisted way you do too. Because, weirdly, identity loss can feel like grief. Not just the loss of others, but the loss of yourself. The older version. The one who didn't know better. The one who could laugh at failure because you hadn't tried for anything serious yet. The one who could say, "Maybe one day," without feeling guilty. And now? Now you want more. You say no to things you used to tolerate. You choose silence over gossip. Rest over hustle. You tell people you're working on yourself, not in a cute Instagram way, but in a real, boring, I actually went to bed on time, kind of way. And people don't always know how to react. Some step back quietly. Others get louder, suddenly critical. They say things like, "You've changed," or "You think you're better than us now." But what they really mean is, you've broken the contract. The unspoken agreement that says, we all stay the same. We all stay small. We all pretend together. And you didn't. So now you're the outsider. There's a random fact I read once: flamingos aren't born pink. They're born gray, and their color comes from the carotenoids in the food they eat, mostly shrimp and algae. So yeah, they literally become what they consume. Kind of poetic, right? People are like that too. We absorb our surroundings. The people. The energy. The conversations. And when you change what you consume, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, you start to shift in color. Not everyone's gonna like your new shade. The first few times I felt that distance setting in, I panicked. I tried to over-explain. I reached out. I over-apologized. I bent backward to make other people comfortable with the version of me I was becoming. And it drained me. Eventually, I learned, the more you apologize for evolving, the slower you evolve. You don't owe anyone the small version of you. Letting go of people doesn't mean you're cruel. It means you're being honest. With them. With yourself. With the season you're in. Some people are only meant to know you in the chapter where you were learning what not to do. And when you move forward, it doesn't invalidate that chapter. It just means the story's progressing. And hey, you'll meet new people. People who see the current you and don't flinch. Who don't hold your past against your present. Who don't miss the old you because they didn't need the broken version to feel connected. That's the kind of community you're building now. Not a crowd, not a pity party, but a circle. Small, maybe, but real. Here's your human intelligence fact for this round. Mirror neurons in our brain are part of why we empathize. They fire when we observe others, allowing us to mirror their emotional state. But they also work in reverse. If someone resents your progress, you feel it. Even if they never say it. That tension is real. Trust it. And let's end on this odd fact. Koalas have fingerprints so similar to humans that even under a microscope, they can be mistaken for ours. Nature really said, copy-paste. The point is, things that look familiar aren't always aligned. Just because someone's been in your life a long time doesn't mean they're meant to walk with you forever. And that's okay. It's not your job to drag everyone forward. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk ahead anyway. You only accept the love you think you deserve. I didn't come up with that. Some movie quote got there first, but it's haunted me for years. Because it's not just about love. It's about everything. Opportunities, friendships, income, peace, health. We don't rise to our goals, we settle at the level of our self-worth. And I'll be honest with you, for a long time, my self-worth was sitting in a dusty folding chair at the back of the room, quietly hoping no one noticed it. I kept saying I wanted more. I wanted better. But I kept choosing less. I'd shoot down praise. Reject good advice. Ghost people who genuinely like me. Undersell myself like I was allergic to being paid properly. And every time something good came toward me, I'd either dodge it or explain it away. Oh, they're just being nice. Oh, that was just luck. Oh, this probably won't last. I wore humility like a security blanket, until it turned into a straitjacket. Eventually, I had to ask, what would happen if I actually believed I deserved good things? That question terrified me more than any failure ever had. Because if I believed I deserved more, then I'd have to stop accepting less. I'd have to confront all the places in my life where I was settling. All the relationships, habits, conversations, and paychecks that were quietly insulting the person I was trying to become. It's like upgrading your wardrobe but still wearing your old shoes because they're comfortable. At some point, the mismatch becomes too obvious. There's this thing in psychology, still the subject of debate, called cognitive dissonance. It's when your actions and beliefs don't align, and it creates mental tension. That's why you feel weird when you get complimented and don't believe it. Or when someone treats you well, and you secretly think it's a trick. Because your beliefs haven't caught up to your new reality yet. I remember getting paid for a freelance gig once, way more than I'd ever made in one shot. Instead of celebrating, I spiraled. I panicked. I told myself I'd have to work twice as hard to justify it. I nearly refunded part of it just to feel in balance. That wasn't about money. That was about worth. Somewhere inside, I believed I could only earn what I suffered for. That if something came easy, or if I enjoyed it, it must be undeserved. Sound familiar? We're taught to glorify struggle, hustle, sacrifice. And yeah, there's value in working hard. But if your self-worth is tied to how much pain you can endure, you'll always sabotage ease. You'll mistake rest for laziness, joy for distraction, success for a fluke. And you'll build a life that reflects those beliefs. There's an odd fact I love: puffins mate for life, and they build their nests on cliff edges, no matter how risky. They return to the same spot, year after year, even if it nearly kills them. Loyalty's great. But if your safe place keeps trying to kill you, maybe it's time to question the nesting strategy. I had to look at my own emotional nesting. Why did I keep returning to jobs that drained me? Friendships that blurred into therapy sessions? Love that felt like performing? Because some part of me didn't believe I could ask for more. So I did this ridiculously uncomfortable thing. I started writing down what I wanted, without editing. No disclaimers. No qualifiers. Just raw, unfiltered desire. More money. More respect. More freedom. A partner who made me laugh and felt safe. A life that didn't require caffeine to survive. And then I stared at the list and waited for Clint, my inner critic, to roast me. But instead, there was silence. Because those things? They weren't unreasonable. They were basic self-respect. The real issue wasn't the list. It was that I didn't think I had permission to want it. Your human intelligence fact for this section: studies in self-determination theory show that people are more motivated and fulfilled when their goals align with intrinsic values, not external validation. In other words, chasing what feels true to you makes your entire nervous system work better. But if you don't believe you deserve what you want, your brain treats it like a threat. That's why affirmations never worked for me when I first tried them. I'd stand in the mirror and say, "I am worthy." And my brain would immediately respond, "Says who? You can't out-affirm what you don't internally believe. At least, not at first." So I stopped saying things I didn't believe, and started saying things I could almost believe. Like, "It's possible I'm allowed to want this." Or, "Maybe I don't have to suffer for everything." Or, "I'm still learning how to feel worthy, and that's okay." It sounds soft. But those tiny truths built a bridge. A slow walk towards self-trust. Here's another wild fact: jellyfish have no brain. They operate through a nerve net that reacts to stimuli. Which means they move, feed, and exist without cognition. Some days, that was me, floating through life, reacting, accepting whatever came my way without intentional choice. But you're not a jellyfish. You can decide. You can raise your price. Set a boundary. Say no. Walk away. Speak up. You can choose not just to survive, but to expect more. That's not ego. That's self-respect in action. And yeah, some people won't like it. They'll call you entitled, difficult, extra. But you know what's really extra? Spending your whole life trying to earn permission to be treated well. So if you're stuck in cycles of sabotage, ask yourself, what do I believe I deserve? And then, be honest about the answer. Because whatever that belief is, that's the thermostat setting for your entire life. I used to think starting over meant failure. Like, every time I scrapped a plan or pivoted or walked away from something I swore I'd finish, I was admitting defeat. But eventually, I realized something much more uncomfortable, and a lot more true. I wasn't starting over. I was just repeating the same story with new characters, new jobs, new hobbies, same plot. A pattern disguised as progress. It took me years to spot it. The cycle went like this: get excited about something new. Dive in headfirst. Get overwhelmed. Freeze. Quit. Feel guilty. Distract myself. Then stumble onto the next big idea. Rinse and repeat. I called it reinventing myself. But really, I was just rebranding my avoidance. Every fresh start was just me sprinting in a different direction, dragging the same unprocessed fear behind me like luggage with one wheel stuck. I thought I was evolving. But I wasn't. I was looping. Because starting over isn't always brave. Sometimes, it's a way to avoid finishing. Sometimes, it's a way to keep hope alive without actually doing the scary part: staying. Sitting with discomfort. Pushing past boredom. Risking exposure. There's a psychological term: behavioral repetition compulsion. It's not universally accepted, but it suggests we unconsciously recreate familiar emotional experiences, especially those rooted in trauma, as a way of trying to gain control or resolve them. So, if you were abandoned, you might keep choosing people who leave. If you were criticized, you might keep choosing roles where you're overworked and undervalued. Why? Because repetition feels safe. We call it starting over. But really, it's starting again, and again, and again, on a path that always circles back to the same point. I noticed this most clearly in relationships. I'd date someone who seemed totally different from the last person: different job, different style, different way of saying cool. But somehow, within weeks, the dynamic would mirror the last one. I'd shrink. I'd overextend. I'd become the emotional translator, the fixer, the one doing the heavy lifting while pretending I was chill. And when it ended, I'd say, I just need a fresh start. What I really needed was a pattern interrupt. Same with work. I'd leave jobs I hated only to find myself in new roles with the same burnout, the same vague resentment, the same Sunday night dread. Different building, same exhaustion. At some point, you have to stop blaming the scenery and start examining the route. I sat down one night and tried to map out my last 5 new beginnings. Every career pivot. Every major relationship. Every city I moved to. I asked myself the hard question: what part of me did I bring into each of these that guaranteed I'd land in the same emotional place? The answer wasn't fun. But it was clear. It was the version of me who didn't believe I deserved stability. Who thought struggle was more noble than ease. Who believed that excitement was the same as alignment. That version needed the chaos. The adrenaline. The spark. And as soon as the spark dimmed and routine showed up, I panicked. I'd say things like, maybe this isn't the right fit, when what I meant was, I don't know how to be still with success. There's this odd fact: termites are blind, but they can build complex structures with proper ventilation, moisture control, and chambers, just by following the scent trails left by other termites. It's incredible. And kind of tragic, too, because sometimes we're not that different. We follow emotional scent trails laid down by past versions of ourselves, and we call it destiny. But scent isn't truth. Feeling familiar doesn't mean something is right. It just means it's known. So how do you stop the cycle? You look for the moment it starts. For me, it was always right after the excitement faded. When the high wore off and reality set in, that's when I'd start self-sabotaging. That's when I'd crave the next beginning. So I started forcing myself to stay in that moment. Not forever. Just long enough to notice. Long enough to sit with the urge to run. To rewrite the story mid-paragraph instead of throwing out the whole book. Sometimes I'd literally whisper to myself, don't start over. Start through. Do the ugly middle. Keep the draft open. Have the awkward conversation. Stay when it's boring. Stay when it's scary. Stay when it's ordinary. Because that's where the shift actually happens. Your brain fact for this section: the basal ganglia is involved in habit formation. Once a loop is formed, cue, routine, reward, it runs on autopilot. That's why you can drive home and forget how you got there. That's also why changing behavior feels so hard. It's not just about willpower. It's about rewiring literal circuits. So I started treating my life like a glitchy app, not deleting and reinstalling every time it froze, but fixing the code underneath. I stopped chasing excitement. I started looking for rhythm. I asked better questions. Like, am I quitting because this is wrong, or because it's unfamiliar? Am I bored, or is this just the part where it gets real? Do I need a new dream, or just new discipline? And guess what? Things got boring. Repetitive. Annoying. But also better. I started finishing things. Keeping promises. I stopped treating the first sign of discomfort as a red flag and started seeing it as a test. Can you sit through this? Or are you going to run again? I'll leave you with this image. Imagine walking a spiral staircase. It feels like you're going in circles. But if you look down, you realize you're higher than you were before. That's the difference between looping and learning. So next time you feel the urge to burn it all down, pause. Look for the familiar echo. Ask if you're really starting over, or just hitting repeat with a new outfit. Because maybe, just maybe, this isn't a new chapter. It's the one where you finally turn the page. If you told me 5 years ago that tiny wins could change my life, I would have laughed, politely, but with full judgment in my eyes. I was all about big moves. Giant transformations. Go big or go scroll through your ex's Instagram in shame. I wanted epic. I wanted fireworks. I wanted the dramatic before and after montage, complete with moody lighting and a synth-pop soundtrack. But epic doesn't stick. At least, not for long. I learned that the hard way, after burning out on a dozen self-improvement sprints. I'd go all in for a week, new routine, new planner, new everything, and then crash. Not because I didn't care, but because I treated change like a performance, not a process. Eventually, I reached a point where I didn't need a breakthrough. I needed a bare minimum. Something real. Something small enough that I couldn't talk myself out of it. So I made a list, the tiniest possible wins I could collect in a day. Make the bed. Drink 1 glass of water. Reply to that email I'd been avoiding since dinosaurs roamed the earth. Somehow it worked. The more I stacked small wins, the more capable I felt. Not heroic. Not impressive. Just grounded. There's a principle in behavioral psychology called the aggregation of marginal gains. It's the idea that tiny improvements, stacked over time, lead to massive outcomes. It's how British cycling went from mediocrity to dominance. They didn't overhaul everything overnight. They improved every little thing by 1%. I figured if it works for cyclists, it can work for a person who can't fold a fitted sheet without summoning a demon. So I tried it. Instead of meditating for 30 minutes, I sat still for 1 minute. Instead of a full workout, I did 5 squats while brushing my teeth. Instead of journaling my entire existential spiral, I wrote down 1 sentence I actually believed. And over time, something shifted. Not just my habits. My identity. Because every tiny win whispers to your brain, see? You're someone who follows through. Even if it's small. Especially when it's small. And this isn't about toxic productivity. I'm not saying turn your life into a checklist or pretend that checking the mail equals enlightenment. I'm saying that momentum is addictive, and you have to build it gently, or it'll break you. You don't need a complete overhaul. You need edges. Anchors. 1 or 2 habits that don't negotiate with chaos. For me, it started with making my bed. It felt dumb at first. Like, congrats, you folded a blanket. But on the days I made my bed, I was 80% more likely to finish a task, eat something with nutrients, and avoid descending into a YouTube hole titled, "What Happened to the Cast of Spy Kids?" Why? Because that one act told my brain, we're doing it today. It created a thread of order in the tangle of noise. And the more threads I added, more water, more sleep, fewer doom scrolls, the more I trusted myself. That's really what tiny wins do. They repair your relationship with yourself. When you're stuck in self-sabotage, what you've really lost isn't motivation. It's credibility. You've broken too many promises to yourself. You say, I'll start tomorrow. And your brain rolls its eyes. You say, "This time's different." And your nervous system just shrugs. So you have to rebuild trust the way you'd rebuild it with someone else, slowly, consistently, with receipts. Tiny wins are receipts. Every glass of water. Every skip snooze button. Every time you get out of bed without checking your phone like it's a crystal ball. You're saying, "See? I do what I say I'll do." And that adds up. Over weeks. Over months. Suddenly, you're not starting from scratch, you're stacking from strength. I remember reading about keystone habits. Habits that, when built, cause ripple effects in other areas of your life. For me, it wasn't going to the gym or mastering some bulletproof morning routine. It was flossing. Laugh if you want. But flossing was my rebel habit. When I flossed, I felt like someone who had their life together. Even if the rest of the day went sideways. It made me feel like I cared about myself. And sometimes, that's enough to make the next good choice. The brain's dopaminergic system is activated not just by rewards, but by progress. Tiny checkmarks on a to-do list? They literally light you up. That's why even fake progress, unearned gold stars in apps, can be motivating. So imagine the power of real progress, even in microdoses. I used to think only big wins counted. But you know what? Big wins are just small wins with good PR. You lose 20 pounds? That's hundreds of small choices. You write a book? Thousands of tiny decisions not to quit. You rebuild your life? One quiet, non-glamorous moment at a time. Now, when I feel the pull of sabotage, that urge to nuke everything because I didn't get it perfect, I remind myself, a tiny win is still a win. Some days, my only win is taking a shower. Or answering one text. Or resisting the urge to over-explain a boundary. But every time I don't self-destruct, even in a tiny way, I collect proof, I am changing. And if I can win today, even by 1 inch, I can win tomorrow. So forget the highlight reel. Forget the dramatic comeback. Start with one tiny thing. Then do it again. And again. And one day, you'll look up and realize, the life you thought would take a miracle? It was built one ordinary, boring, brilliant little win at a time. This might sound strange, but I've come to believe that sabotage is a kind of hope. Twisted? Absolutely. Backwards? No doubt. But hope, all the same. Because you don't destroy something unless you believe there's something better to destroy. You don't ruin the moment unless deep down, some part of you expected it to go differently. You ever notice that? That we sabotage not when we've given up, but when things are actually going well? It's like we get spooked by our own progress. Like, wait, this feels too good. I must be dreaming. Better break it before someone else does. And at first I thought this was just fear. And it is fear. But under the fear is something more vulnerable. Hope. Hope that you could do something big. Hope that someone might love you back. Hope that maybe this time, you won't mess it up. But hope is dangerous when you haven't healed. It shows up in strange costumes. It becomes perfectionism, procrastination, control, chaos. It becomes sabotage. Because if you crash the plane before it lands, at least it wasn't the landing's fault, right? I once started dating someone who was good to me. Too good, honestly. They showed up on time. Communicated clearly. Didn't flinch at my weirdness. And what did I do? I panicked. I started nitpicking, creating drama, emotionally retreating. Not because I didn't like them, but because I did. And I knew that if I let it continue, I might start hoping. Hoping it could last. Hoping I was lovable as is. And that kind of hope? That's the most dangerous kind. Because if it crashes into you. So I sabotaged. Quietly. Elegantly. Subtly. Just enough to say later, "See? Told you." But told who? That's the thing about sabotage. It's never just about the moment. It's about the story you're trying to prove right. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as confirmation bias, the tendency to seek out, interpret, and remember information that confirms your existing beliefs. So if you believe you're unworthy, you'll interpret success as a fluke and failure as proof. And guess what? You'll create just enough mess to keep that belief intact. But what if we flipped it? What if sabotage isn't proof that you've given up, but that some small, terrified, underfed part of you still believes something more is possible? What if it's just bad strategy? Like a bird flying into a window because it thinks it's a way out. Painful. Pointless. But rooted in instinct, not malice. And once I saw sabotage this way, I stopped punishing myself for it. I got curious instead. When I'd catch myself ghosting someone, or avoiding a big opportunity, or dragging my feet on a project I wanted, I stopped asking, "What's wrong with me?" and started asking, "What part of me still doesn't feel safe hoping for more?" That one question changed everything. Because under all the wreckage was always a version of me who wanted something deeply. Who still believed in the possibility of joy, success, connection. Who just didn't trust the delivery method. And yeah, hope hurts. It's fragile. It sets you up for loss. But the alternative? Never trying. Never risking. Never caring? That's not safety. That's numbness. There's a weird fact about sea turtles. When the babies hatch, they head toward the brightest thing they can see, usually the ocean. But in cities, artificial lights confuse them. So they run toward parking lots, roads, hotels. They don't want danger. They're just misreading the signals. That's sabotage. And it's what we do. Not because we don't want to grow, but because we're wired to follow light, even if we mistake a red flag for a lighthouse. So, how do you change it? Start by not fighting your sabotage. Watch it. Study it. Get forensic. When did it start? What triggered it? What outcome were you afraid of? Then look for the hope underneath. The thing you were trying to protect. The thing you believed in, just enough to get scared. Maybe you backed out of the opportunity because you were hoping this one would finally work, and if it didn't, you didn't know how to survive another disappointment. Maybe you picked a fight because you were hoping the relationship would matter, and if it didn't, you didn't want to find out the hard way. Maybe you didn't submit your work because you were hoping to be taken seriously, and you didn't want to risk rejection killing that hope. In all of those moments, sabotage was your body saying, "This means something." And when something means something, it becomes fragile. That's when we self-destruct. Not to fail, but to pre-fail. So we don't have to feel the sting of letting someone else do it for us. The insula, a part of the brain linked to risk and uncertainty, is activated when we anticipate rejection or embarrassment. And here's the catch, it often activates before anything actually happens. So your body flinches from a threat that hasn't even arrived yet. That's why sabotage feels like protection. But it's a false alarm. And if you can learn to pause in that moment, just for a beat, you can make a new choice. You can say, "I'm scared because this matters. I'm pulling away because I care. I'm freaking out because I still believe." Hope is baked into the very heart of sabotage. It's a scared, messy kind of hope, but hope nonetheless. And when you catch it, when you see it sitting there beneath the ruins of another almost good thing, you get to do the bravest thing of all. Try again. Not blindly. Not perfectly. But intentionally. This time, knowing that sabotage is not your enemy. It's a signal. A misfired flare. A bad map that says, you're getting close. So next time you feel the urge to run, destroy, disappear, quit, pause. And ask, what am I really hoping for? Then choose to believe in that, on purpose, and out loud. Because hope isn't weakness. It's a quiet declaration that, despite all the wreckage, you're still in the game. For most of my life, I thought I was broken. Not in a dramatic, fall to the floor kind of way. More like a subtle hum underneath everything I did. I could be laughing at a party, checking off wins, making people proud, and still, there was that quiet static inside me whispering, "You're faking it. You're defective. Everyone else got the manual but you." And so, I lived like someone trying to hide a crack in the glass. I became high-functioning. Charming, even. I turned my fear into funny anecdotes. My pain into productivity. My doubt into drive. It worked. Until it didn't. Until the scaffolding I'd built around my brokenness got too heavy to carry. Until the mask started cracking. Until I realized that constantly running from my supposed flaws wasn't fixing them, it was feeding them. That's when it hit me. I wasn't broken. I was just trained to believe I was. Maybe you felt it too, that invisible pressure to always be improving, always chasing, always fixing. Like you're some home renovation project that's never quite finished. But what if the cracks weren't flaws? What if they were signals? Messages from the parts of you that got left behind. The parts that adapted in order to survive. The parts that made bad choices because they had no other tools. Not because you're bad, but because you were trying. Every form of sabotage I've talked about, the procrastination, the chaos, the self-doubt, the avoidance, wasn't born from weakness. It was born from protection. Your brain, your body, your entire nervous system? They're designed to keep you safe. Even when that safety looks like hiding, shrinking, staying small. Especially then. But the thing is, what once kept you safe can become what keeps you stuck. And when you start growing, healing, evolving, those old strategies don't disappear quietly. They fight back. They panic. They scream. Don't change the system. This is what kept us alive. There's a phrase I once heard. Survival skills make terrible lifestyle habits. And it's true. The defenses that helped you endure the chaos of childhood, heartbreak, burnout, loss, they don't know how to differentiate between then and now. So they keep activating, like an overcautious smoke alarm. You're not broken. You're responding to outdated programming. And the more you treat yourself like a problem to solve, the more those old systems dig in. Because they think you're attacking the whole house, when really, you're just trying to rearrange the furniture. So what do? You start by shifting the question from, "What's wrong with me?" to, "What worked for me once that no longer serves me now?" That's how you stop fighting yourself. That's how you begin to listen. Your brain's default mode network, the part that lights up during self-reflection and daydreaming, is also where rumination and self-criticism live. But when paired with mindfulness or compassion-based practice, that same network begins to reorganize itself. The wiring doesn't vanish. It just starts working for you instead of against you. You can understand it like, you don't erase the past. You reassign it. That hypervigilance? It can become awareness. That anxiety? It can become preparation. That chaos? It can become creativity. Your old systems aren't useless. They're just outdated. And guess what? You have the power to update them. Not overnight. Not in a perfect straight line. But with grace. With repetition. With the smallest of rewrites. There's an odd little fact I love: starfish can regenerate lost limbs. And in some species, a single arm can regrow a whole new body. Healing doesn't always look like patching holes. Sometimes it's becoming new from just one part of yourself that refused to die. One spark of joy. One breath of hope. One moment where you choose to respond instead of react. You're not here to fix yourself. You're here to return to yourself. To the version of you that existed before you learned to doubt. The version that dreamed loudly, loved messily, believed deeply. The version that didn't yet think they were too much, or not enough. That version never left. They just got covered in armor. And now, piece by piece, you're learning how to take it off. So if you're tired of the sabotage cycles, the emotional hangovers, the guilt spirals, here's your permission slip. You don't need to be perfect to begin again. You don't need to earn your own kindness. You don't need to keep proving that you're worthy of peace. You already are. All that's left is to believe it, even if just for a second. And if that belief falters tomorrow, you try again. That's not failure. That's freedom. So breathe deep. Forgive the part of you that got it wrong 100 times. Then take one small step toward getting it right, for you. Because you weren't born broken. You were born becoming. And you still are. So here we are. At the edge of the story, maybe yours, maybe mine, maybe both. If you've made it this far, you already know, self-sabotage isn't the villain you thought it was. It's not some evil force waiting to ruin your life. It's a tired bodyguard doing its best to protect a version of you that doesn't exist anymore. And now? You get to thank it. And gently let it go. Let go of the hustle that never made you feel whole. Let go of the perfectionism that kept you paralyzed. Let go of the drama you mistook for connection, and the comfort you confused with love. Because you've seen the pattern. You've walked the spiral. You've learned that the work isn't to burn it all down and start over, it's to pause. Notice. Interrupt. And begin again, from where you are. Even if your voice shakes. Even if your hands tremble. Even if no one claps. That's courage. And it doesn't have to be loud. It can be the whisper of a yes when you normally say no. The softness of choosing sleep over spiraling. The quiet moment you decide to believe, maybe just a little, that this time it could be different. Because it can. You're not a lost cause. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're building a life that doesn't require sabotage just to feel safe in it. So take a deep breath. Soften your shoulders. And step into your next chapter, not like you're fixing something, but like you're finally coming home. This version of you? You don't have to earn it. You just have to allow it.